of Regulated and Relational, the bi-monthly podcast brought to you by the Attachment and Trauma Network. In the studio with Ginger and Julie today is Martin Sims, the Dopest Coach. Come hear about what DOPE stands for and how Martin is using Dr. Bruce Perry's neurosequential model of education in a new way. Let's jump right in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Regulated and Relational, our podcast produced by the Attachment and Trauma Network. I'm Ginger Healy.
And I'm Julie Beam.
And we're excited to share with you from both our personal experience and our professional knowledge what it truly means to be attachment-focused, trauma-informed, and how we can help children impacted by early childhood trauma. Today, we are excited to introduce you to a friend of ATN, Martin Sims. Welcome, Martin.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Martin, we're going to have Julie introduce everybody to you. You've got an impressive resume, and we just want everybody to know who you are and what you've been up to.
Exactly. Okay. So Martin Sims is a neurosequential sports specialist, a mental health consultant, and the founder of the Dopest Coach Academy. He works through brain-based models to help athletes heal trauma and achieve peak performance. He founded the Dopest Coach Academy, where he educates coaches on how to become mental health advocates. And he was honored with the 2023 BET Joy Award and the 2021 NBA Program of the Year nomination for the focus that the Coach Academy has on mental health. He's facilitated programs internationally, and we were lucky as ATN to have him this year at our annual Creating Trauma-Sensitive Schools conference, where he presented on his programming and he received rave reviews. So we couldn't wait to get him on the podcast and dive a little bit deeper about how Martin got where he is and what he's trying to do and doing very successfully out there. So Martin, let's just start at the beginning. Like you have shared with us, you shared with us at the conference that you had a life-changing experience around age 14, that you witnessed the death of a neighbor, and that shifted and shaped your path. So can you talk to us a little bit about that and how you got from age 14 to where you are now?
Yeah. The incident at 14 was coupled with, it was 2 days before Christmas. He was playing basketball.
Wow.
And I'm always playing basketball. Basketball has been my thing for a long time. But this particular day, my neighbor's son came to his father's house. And he came outside to play with us, played 2 games of 3-on-3, and he passed away of a heart attack.
Mm.
And from that point, trying to process the moment of, well, I would say that day, because it was maybe like an hour or so in between us meeting him, because I met him that day. I didn't know him. I knew his father. He came over. And once we started playing, I ended up playing on his team. Mm-hmm. So he was a really good teammate for 2 games. And then he passed. And I learned about who this person was after he passed. I learned about it from his father. I learned about him, through various stories and things that came out after his death. And those things really shaped me pretty bad, because he was only 33 years old. And so I felt responsible in a way of his passing. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think there were real containers to hold that which I felt like I went through watching that. Also, one of the things that I feel like I experienced was what they would call survivor's guilt. I don't think I would call it a survivor's guilt or survivor's remorse, because I don't think I was ever in danger of, passing myself. However, the secondary trauma that I think we don't pay attention to about people who witness other people go through traumatic experiences, and how we need to help them as well. And that also shows up in kids. And so it was 20 years later before I had an understanding of how this incident affected so many of the subsequent events that happened when I was in school, which, of course, there were academic problems first, and then that turns into behavior problems in the school setting if it's not trauma informed, if it's not uh, looked at through the lens of how can we help a kid heal, or what are these behavior issues suggesting, or what can we uncover behind them versus what do we do for a kid who does this. And so for me in high school, I wasn't bad, but I, the ADHD, PTSD type things that
Yes.
they
Yeah.
think those have overlapping symptoms. I started really experiencing those when we went back to school because, of course, this incident happened over the school break.
Yes.
Right.
So I left school one student and I came back a different student because I had experienced this incident. There just was never a question of that when we talk about what happened to you or what may have happened, the difference between the student I was before the holiday break and after the holiday break, there was just no one to see the correlation, not myself, not my parents, not the teachers. No one knew. So,
Nobody was asking why.
Yeah.
so all you have is my grades. And now that they're dipping, now it's looking like I'm unfocused, undisciplined. I shouldn't be playing sports because I can't. And so what I was losing was the one regulatory thing that allowed me to regulate. And I didn't know it at the time, but I saw how it affected me. And so I stopped going to that school, went to another school. I played basketball at every single school that I went to. And I think that attributed to me lasting as long in school as I did. And as I got older and when I started studying with Dr. Perry or started studying some of the things when it come to childhood trauma, I could really, really connect that moment and the things that happened afterwards to what I needed to learn to heal in myself as a 33-year-old that had a baby on the way. And that's ultimately where I started understanding the neuroscience behind the childhood trauma because we really went to therapy to prepare for the newborn baby. So in
Mhm.
therapy, Dr. Perry his book, The Boy That Was Raised as a Dog, was recommended to me by my therapist to help me understand some dissociative behaviors that may have come from this incident and subsequent incidents afterwards based on how people handle me or how I handle things after the incident. And so I believe that the biggest aha moment for me was the neurosequential model because I could understand the sequencing of where my brain was developed at the time of a 14-year-old. And my therapist pointed it out. And this is a huge point. I experienced that moment almost like it happens every day.
Wow.
And so when she explained to me like the limbic system at the age of 14 is probably more developed than the prefrontal cortex, so you processing that through the limbic system, and it's highly tied to memory and it's highly tied to emotions, the limbic system. So if that memory is being charged through that particular part of the brain, then that's where from the sequential model, that's where you need to go start the healing. And so, of course, I started trying to figure out what's the limbic system and what does that mean and how do I go about doing it. And lo and behold, a lot of the things that I was already doing, which was the pattern repetitive rhythmic movement in sport, and now I could be more intentional about it. And the way Dr. Perry is like regulate, relate, reason. And I'm like, okay, how do I regulate? Like outside of basketball, like outside of like doing pattern repetitive rhythmic movement things, how do I also regulate myself when I can't shoot a basketball or I can't run or I can't, rock or something like that? What can I do to regulate then? And so then that becomes an additional skill to develop. And then because I love sports, I just frame the emotional things as skills. It's like, okay, I could develop a skill to process this emotion in this way, or this is how I can develop this emotional resilience is by repetitively practicing a skill when this stimulus shows up. But all of that is new language that I learned after I started learning this, and it's just not readily available. And so you really can't blame people who don't know what they don't know. So that's where the issue comes in. I think that's where trauma informed or trauma becoming trauma aware is big. It's like when you're aware of it, it's now in your consciousness, and you can now use it as a way to help you come up with a solution.
Yeah.
If you're not aware of it, it's not a part of the solution box, and you only have the tools that you currently have. And I think that they're outdated because they don't factor in these things, which are very huge in the way we show up and what behaviors are exhibited in places
Mm-hmm.
when we feel unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And I think what I want to know, like you had already been doing things, you just didn't necessarily have the words for it, but that you knew that that basketball was saving your life, right? That it was regulating and you mentioned other sports too. And so is that kind of talk about how you decided to start this Dope Academy and what Dope stands for and how sports really do fit into that neurosequential model of regulation first and relating before we even get to that top part of the brain where we can reason and reflect.
Yeah, absolutely. I was never able to get away from sports, so to speak. Like it was something that I needed. I stay active for pretty much the majority of my life. Actually, I felt like basketball was my therapy before I ever got a
Yeah.
cognitive understanding, because if I needed to, and I played other sports, but basketball was the main one that I would always go to. So that would be my sport of choice. But the the fact that it's already regulating with rhythm, so that whole rhythmic aspect of the game, and then without saying like getting into the somatics or talking about the somatics, it's a lot of somatics involved in the sport. Like it's a whole body experience. You have to be really present in order to play, or you should be, and most people are. And because your cardio is up, you're in a heightened sense. It really collapses timelines to me. Like what lessons you'll learn in 1 hour of sport may take you 6 months in a classroom, just because of
Mhm.
how much is involved, like how many of the systems are involved, how much processing you have to do, like cognitive processing, just being able to throw the ball back and forth. You have to have spatial awareness. You have to understand depth of perception, all of those things that go into that. And this is training the brain, believe it or not. You know what I mean? And so like
Yeah.
it's helping build resilience in ways that don't require you to cognitively be like thinking about it. And that's good, because that's the same area that has this flight, fight, and freeze response. It doesn't think, you know what I mean? And so like being able to train it in a controlled stress environment where you have the a balance between stressors that sports provides and control that sports provides. Like you don't want to be so chaotic that the stress is overwhelming and unpredictable, but it's pretty predictable in sports for the most part, barring injury. The rest of the stressors are pretty predictable. You know what you're gonna get. Like if you're playing basketball, a foul is a thing that could happen, and you're physically and mentally prepared for something like that to happen.
Yeah. There are rules, right?
Yeah.
And boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Out of bounds, right? Like, and so like, even if you took that language and said, like, okay, like instead of we like to say setting boundaries and trauma informed spaces and stuff, and you say,
Mm-hmm.
like, well, that behavior was out of bounds. People have a more understanding of that than
Good.
saying like
Mm-hmm.
setting boundaries, because it's not in our lexicon or our
Ooh, that's
conversation.
good.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mhm.
and we know that's a violation. Something happens when things get out of bounds. Sometimes you lose a possession of the ball. You might lose an opportunity because it went out of bounds. And so then you'll understand natural consequence to, and that helps people understand boundaries. And being able to use analogies of what people already understand is what I'm finding is the best way for me to go about having people understand the whole trauma informed thing, because people know about it, they just don't make the connection. So it feel like for me, honestly, there was two dots that I didn't know needed to be connected, and I found through like the neurosequential model and neuroscience that I found the connection. And I think there's a lot of other people who don't know that these 2 points connect. And when they do find whatever connects them for them, then they go and share that with other people. And that's how this trauma aware, trauma informed movement spreads, because it's about connecting dots for people. And when you can connect those dots and people have these aha moments like, oh, that's why I've been doing this like this. Now I can make a change. And I think sports allows those changes to happen quick or the awareness to happen quick because the game, I'm saying that same hour slot of time of just playing a game that has really doesn't have any ramifications, but because it's a game, it does. Like when it's 2 seconds left on the clock and the kids, they could be 10-year-olds playing basketball. The score could be 10-12, and everybody in the stands' hearts is beating like we're watching the Super Bowl because it's 2 seconds left and will
Right.
one of these 10-year-olds make a shot? And it evokes that level of dysregulation, even if it's a positive anticipation, but it's still a dysregulation. Your heart is beating fast, like
Mhm.
everything's going, you're nervous and you're not even playing.
Mm.
So it has that effect not only on the participants, but also the people who watch. And so I just think it's a powerful modality, sports in and of itself. And so creating the Dope Coach Academy was natural for me because I've been coaching, I've been playing. I'm every part of what I call this diamond. I'm every part of the diamond. There's a coach, there's an athlete, there's a player, and then there's the community. I mean, athlete, parent, in the community. And I'm every part. I'm a coach, I'm an athlete, I'm a parent at times. I'm part of the community that supports sports teams and educate. And so when you're all of these, all of them connect, and you want to connect them, you want to have shared language between them. You know what I mean? And you
Mhm.
share understanding, shared goals, shared intentions. And when you have that, then it creates this sanctuary model of healing where it doesn't happen in a vacuum, but it doesn't have to because every part of it has some form of the healing understanding that allows for this resilience to be built and understanding and compassion to be experienced in order to process the things that may have happened to you and turn them into something positive. I'm more along the lines of turning it into positive versus like just
Right.
coping with it. And I think that was a powerful moment. That guy came over my house and that happened to him because when I was 14, I would say from maybe like 14 to 25, there was a question I had in my head and it was, why did he come to my house to die?
Mm.
Because I never met him before that day. So he lived his entire life, and on the last hour of his life, he came to my house. So that was a question that haunted me, I would say, because I felt responsible. I'm like, why would I have to look at that? Like, why did I have to see that? I could have been in the house that day. I could have been doing anything other than what I was doing, and it happened. And so now I don't feel like it's haunting me. I think it's fueling me because it's like, hey, like I'm the person that had to figure this out. Like I had the capacity to be a great student in school without this moment happening, but it shows you how trauma can disrupt the learning journey. And so if I could speak to it now in my 30s going into my 40s and I can be a voice for 14-year-olds today to say like, hey, look, trauma does disrupt the learning journey. I was never a dropout student. I just
Mhm.
had a trauma that caused that to be the situation, and I was able to overcome it. Much of it had to do with the fact that I could play basketball. I had a second chance at going to college because I could play basketball. So I got a
Mhm.
chance to go get a GED, get a scholarship, play basketball, go back to college. And then that opened a lot of doors for me. But I have a language that I can make someone that had maybe going through something not like what I went through, but anything that could disrupt the learning journey. And so, yeah, I feel like I feel like now it's a calling. So it goes from being like what happened to him or what happened to me goes from like I know why. Like now it was for me to extract the wisdom out of the moment. His life was gone. If that's what his spirit had him do, like this is the person that could figure this out. I don't know what happened, what happened to him before that point. But for me, it's like, okay, this had to have a higher reason for me. And I've chosen to lean into that because I can't make the memories go away.
Right.
So I have to use them in a way where they're positive or they would probably make me crazy.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, Martin, I really want to dig into how you have leaned in and what that means for the coaches and the folks that are working with children today, like what you're actively doing with coaches and trainers. So we're going to take a break and be right back.
Can't wait.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Cassis. You don't want to miss ATN's Building Resilient Communities for Children virtual conference, June 23rd and 24th. This conference was designed for all adults who work with, care for, and love children. That's right, every one of us. We have 5 tracks: parenting, education, youth justice, community organizations, and counselors and clinicians. But everyone registered can attend any session in any track. Plus, you have 30 days after the conference to view recordings of any or all of the sessions. And did I mention that Dr. Bruce Perry is our opening keynote speaker? He will be talking specifically about how to build resilience. You don't want to miss it. We have brought together many of the best and brightest within ATN's network over the last 30 years. Plus, I'm so excited that we'll be able to offer a discount to nonprofit organizations and special pricing to parents and caregivers. And professionals needing continuing ed can receive CEs and college credit. To see the whole lineup and learn more, visit attachtraumanetwork.org/BRCC or Building Resilient Communities for Children. I'll see you there.
Okay, everybody, we are back with Martin Sims of the Dope Coach Academy. And when we stepped away for a moment, you had just told us how this life-changing event for you was the opportunity for you to understand about becoming trauma informed and then grow that, which is really what you're doing through the Dope Coach Academy. So talk to us about that, about what you do with coaches and trainers, and how you're helping them to become advocates and make a difference for the kids.
Yeah, definitely. So number one, we help coaches understand the brain, the sequencing of the brain and how it works when everything is going good. And then we teach them how trauma can disrupt it. And then we teach them how to use regulation skills, so somatic regulation skills, and then the skills that's based on the sequences of the brain. And we do this in a cool way, really super fun way. Like we just infuse it into the practices. We infuse it into what they're already doing. They don't have to do too much. They just have to learn a new words, some new language, and then be able to connect that to some behaviors that they may be seeing with their players or sometimes with their staff. And then it increases the communication between the coaches and the athletes and the understanding between them. And in my experience with the coaches that I've already worked with, it's very eye-opening. It's eye-opening for them to be able to see and make the connection between what we're talking about, because honestly, coaches coach how they've been coached. And there's been a perpetuation of, you know, you won't call it abuse anywhere else. I mean, you won't call it abuse in sports, but in some places, the same thing a coach would do on a basketball court would get a teacher fired in the same school.
Yep.
And so what we're trying to do is foster a lot of harm reduction in sports by teaching trauma informed practice and having coaches understand what could possibly be going through the head of maybe one of their most challenging players, because it probably maybe that tactic that they use about yelling or not saying like you can't yell in sports because sometimes it's a loud environment. So just saying yelling by itself needs to be clarified. It's not the yelling that's the thing, but tone does matter. How you go about it, if we get to name calling or things of that nature that could cause harm to an athlete. And I'm gonna bring this up because it just happened 2 days ago or maybe yesterday. Um, there was an athlete that was supposed to be in an NFL draft coming in the next couple of weeks. He committed suicide. He was from LSU. And so he's a college athlete. Now he's 24, so this wouldn't count for like K through 12 schools. But as far as an athlete is concerned, he was the cause of a car wreck that killed a 78-year-old man in about 7 or 8 months ago, something like that. And he was set to go to court for that, even though next week or the following week, when the NFL draft, he was scheduled to be a top pick.
Mm.
So he committed suicide. And the reason I bring that up is because since I've been doing this work, a lot of times the only time that trauma informed is important is after a real crisis or tragedy. In those in between times, if we don't really feel like there's a huge tragedy that's happening, it's not really prioritized. And then oftentimes when it's a tragedy, it's kind of too late for us to do anything. And
Yes.
it doesn't have to be a suicide tragedy, but sometimes like just creating these sanctuary spaces is important to be able to absorb situations or prevent those types of situations so we can know that okay, he's struggling so much that he does need that help. Like nobody had no idea how bad I was struggling, and so I just ended up either getting kicked out of school, getting another suspension, another detention, another this, but I'm struggling. I need more help than punishment. I need more help than those types of things. And so we teach coaches less of the punitive type things and try to encourage them to create systems of incentivize actions that the kids can do to build their resilience or build their disciplines versus this punitive approach. And so it's new. I mean, and it's it's gonna face some backlash because people have been doing it the way that they've been doing it up until now, and because they probably have won 20 games a year every year through some of their methods, then of course in sports, just like in schools, the stats and the metrics kind of
Hmm.
dictate how and what we
Yeah.
do. If we've been graduating 90% of our class, then we don't really need to make a change in how we handle kids or how we should, you know, uh, do a trauma informed approach. Why not? Our kids are doing well, right? And so sometimes the tragedies are the only thing that wakes people up. And then I
Mm,
hate
yeah.
hate to say that, but when we talk about trauma informed work, it's kind of like the trauma needs to be front and center for us to take it serious. And then that momentum dies until there's another
Yeah.
tragedy, which
So
is
if you have a winning season, you're probably not going to reevaluate your program and make it trauma informed, right?
yeah, probably not. You probably have to have the child um who's going through something outwardly. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that response is an outward response that may bring embarrassment to the school or to the coach or something like that. Like those are the types of things that happen because if it's a player who just shuts down, we don't respond to the shutdown players. We respond to the ones that do something that get them kicked out of the game and have to get a police escort to the locker room. That's when we
Mhm.
respond to that in sports. But the players that shut down, even if it was due to abuse, it just continues to perpetuate. And then we put the onus on that kid to stand up for yourself or something
Yeah.
like that, right?
Stand Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. And that's why I love what you're doing so much because you kind of hinted towards this group of kids out there that I refer to as like silent sufferers. You have
mhm,
no idea what's going on in them. You were one of those. I was one of those. It sounds like this college athlete that you referred to, was one of
mhm,
those. And coaches have this like amazing, unique opportunity. It's a different relationship, but there is so much power and potential in this relationship that a coach has that is different than a caregiver. And, I think that you are saving lives in this work because of that and that it can be so much more than people recognize. And I just love that you're bringing awareness to that. So I'm really moved right now thinking about myself as a child, thinking about what you went through and this athlete that you brought up, that there is so much more there that can be done. Do you have, are, can you share some of the things that you do on a practical level that really work and that maybe even our listeners can kind of take away?
yeah, I think the number one thing is being able, when we talk about like relational safety, and that's a huge thing. Like my coaches, I don't remember who told me the best how to shoot the shot the best. I remember who what coaches I connected with the most. You know what I
Wow.
mean?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I might have had a coach that I connected with so well, I didn't realize he didn't teach me anything about the sport. Like he just taught me about being a good person and how to connect. And he listened to me. And
Yeah.
those I think those things go much further than any tactics or strategies because the tactics or strategies they can change person by person, player by player, depending on what it is. But the way you find those perfect tools and solutions to apply to each athlete is you listen to them and you talk to them, and sometimes you got to talk way more than you listen, sometimes you got to listen way more than you talk, depending on the athlete. I got some athletes that you probably they'll never tell you what was going on. I didn't tell none of my
Yep.
coaches no. You know what I mean? Like the
Yep.
coaches that I had growing up, I didn't feel safe to share anything with them. I didn't feel like you know it was important. I also didn't even feel like I should be talking about it because I felt responsible for it. So that was something I really had to
Mm.
unpack. You know what I mean? And there's so much nuance. We like, oh, the kid went through this, and we like, oh, I understand. That's a bad thing to go through. I can see how they're struggling with it. But there's specifics to what they're struggling with. Sometimes it's speaking up, sometimes it's paying attention, sometimes it's being able to really connect with someone. Like you never know what those things are. And here's the other thing. Most kids cannot articulate what they are going through. They
Right.
cannot put it into
Yes.
words.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is why the somatics is so important because I couldn't put anything into words when I was in high school, but I could play basketball and that made it better for me. I don't know what it would have been like if I did not have basketball also dealing with what I saw. I
Mhm.
have no idea. And I don't think I'd be where I am today. I can tell you that much. So I wore a shirt and I sent it to the junior NBA when we got the nomination and whatever. And it's like the graphic that they use, and on the shirt it has basketball saved my life. And I
Mm.
truly believe that. However, it's it's a crazy dichotomy because that same shirt makes me feel guilty for wearing it if his brother sees it.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Because his brother was there and his brother had to do the CPR and his brother had to do all the things that, didn't come. So I'm like, when I posted on Facebook, I'm like, probably shouldn't post this. I felt great about it, but that's the nuance of trauma sometimes. It's like in my greatest moment, there's still like this, I don't know, you know?
There's
And so I think when we
Mhm.
but coaches have their stories. Coaches are coaching for their own reasons, their own passions, their own traumas that they went through. And I think if they're able to unpack some of their own stuff and able to process some of the things that they process, they could show up in a better way. And they're not as charged by things that happen with the athletes as well. And I think it just creates a safer environment for everybody, especially emotionally and based on trauma things. And a guy again, a lot of the kids not gonna say it, they're not gonna share it, they
Right.
don't know to say it or share it or don't have the ability or capacity to do so. So I think if the coaches knew better, they would show up better. A lot of this stuff I don't explain a lot of the brain stuff all the time. I don't get into the depths of what I know about it because it's unnecessary. They need the
Mhm.
connection first before they need all of this knowledge about. Nobody cares what the diencephalon does, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
So,
I do, and you do, but exactly. It's in the grand scheme of what
mhm.
folks need to know. You are absolutely right. I mean, it's, um, and really the other thing I hear you talking about is giving everybody space to build relationships, and that even the coaches that have been doing it very wrong, like in a punitive model, I mean, that part of their motivation for being a coach has to be because they care about the players and they want to have some kind of connection to, to the players. It's not 100% about what can I, manipulate people into doing to win, right? So there's more that it sports are relational, and for you to zero in on that, I think is hugely important. Um and that's, yeah, and that's what I hear when you talk.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think the relational part of sports is one of the most powerful parts because it it goes through just the moment of everybody in the locker room. This
Mhm.
literally broadcasts worldwide. The Super Bowl is the most watched thing. And like
Mhm.
we as a population want to see the sports. We want to, they've been doing it since the Roman times and the
Yes.
Yeah.
gladiators and things of that nature. This is something that even if you're not a part of it, some kind of way vicariously you live through it. So I believe that like it's deeper than just me helping the coaches and helping the athletes. If the coaches and athletes become advocates and influencers of the things that we're talking about, then it goes faster, it goes farther, it has more reach. All the companies, Nike, you name it, that have all these endorsements with the athletes, they have them because of how we relate to athletes. They're not
Yes.
doing that for Dr. Perry. Dr. Perry doesn't have a shoe. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Mhm.
So, as brilliant as he is, the sports figures are going to push this narrative. All it takes is for an athlete to read what happened to you and talk about it, and then that blows up all over again, like it did with Oprah.
Mhm.
You understand what I'm saying? So athletes have this powerful way to push a message if they can embody the message. So I believe like wholeheartedly, like the Dope Coach Academy, and we'll have athletes that will come through, coaches that will come through, that will begin to speak on the transformations that they've seen based on learning this knowledge and then applying it to their games and their teams. And then it'll take off more in that sense because athletes, even in their schools, are viewed as the leaders or the representatives of the schools. And so that'll have an effect on a kid who doesn't play the sport that they play
Right.
because hey, look,
Yeah.
this kid is starting to do a regulation technique before his free throws, or he's starting to do something. What are they doing on the bench?
Yes.
During a game, if the crowd is full and they see the kids doing some type of regulation ritual on the bench, that's going to make people curious, and that's going to make
Mhm.
people want to get more involved because it's like,
Mhm.
well, our star player is doing a meditation right before he shoots his free throws. I didn't know what that was, but I mean, I've seen it happen. I've seen kids
Mhm.
learn to develop this routine that will calm their nerves more than just focus or calm down. Like we say, we actually
Right.
teach
Right.
them
Right.
regulation tools to regulate their nervous system before they go into do a performance or before they go into a game. And then they'll have their own testimonials and then we'll see how that goes. And that's like long term and like how
Yeah.
it can influence. But I do wholeheartedly see that happening, like as kids start to and as coaches start to really buy into what it is that I'm talking about. And I'm
Mhm.
sold. I don't need to be sold on it. I've seen it work with kids
Yeah.
all the way. They're grown now. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I've watched it transpire for these kids. So it's just a matter of it getting out there and more and more athletes adopting it and coaches adopting it and then speaking on their experiences. And I'm certain that they'll
Mhm.
have better experiences with their athletes and their athletes' parents. That's a big thing. You
Yes.
know what I mean? That communication,
Yes.
uh, shared goals and
Yes.
shared understandings about like just being two authorities with the same kid. Both of us want the best for him, but how we go about it,
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
a thing. So that's what we try to help with organizations. Try to make that diamond clear, making sure that their diamond is clear between coaches, athletes, parents, and the community.
Yes. Now,
That's
and I'm
so
so
good.
I'm so glad you stopped there because as you were talking, I wanted to make sure we got back to that diamond, to
Hmm.
all the facets of that diamond, because that is why we are so honored at the Attachment and Trauma Network to have you with us for our new building resilient communities for children, is because as we talked, Martin, and got to know each other a little bit better, it became crystal clear to me that what you're doing spans all the tracks of our conference: the
Hmm.
parenting, the education track, the youth justice, and the community tracks. And it's the conference is for anybody who's loving children and wants to become trauma informed, and your work really is too. And so that's why we're honored to have you as our closing speaker of the conference, but say more again about the connectivity between the parents and the coaches and the communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that you guys are doing all of these tracks. And when I looked at the flyer and I looked at all the tracks that you guys had on the bill, and I see so sports can be kind of competitive, like really
Mhm.
competitive against everybody, and then it just could be recreational,
Right.
right? And so like if you make it recreational, the pattern repetitive rhythmic movement still goes along. If you make it recreational, the relational safety still can be there if you start understanding it. And again, when we talk about this diamond between coaches, athletes, parents, and community, we want to know how clear that diamond is. How clear is the communication? How clear is our expectations? How clear those things are from the athlete to the parent, from the athlete to the coach, athlete to the community. How is the community supporting the parent? How is the community supporting the athlete? How is the community supporting the coach? Because at the end of the day, we all need the relational safety and we need the community in order to be strong as we possibly
Yes.
can. We're designed that way. We're biologically wired
Yes.
to be in a group. We're biologically wired to be connected to other human beings.
Mhm.
And what disrupts that connection is traumatic things can disrupt it, or just not understanding that it actually needs to be there. And then this is what we should strive to do. And then we need communication skills. We need emotional regulation skills. We need mental resilience skills. So we need to build those skills in community so everybody that's a part of this community can feel fulfilled or be supported. And so when you talk about youth justice track, that is about basically not allowing kids to go into that situation and have to go back. So we want to reduce recidivism. How do you do that? We
Mhm.
give the kids something to do that's more like able to build their confidence, able to build their connections with people around them, and then
Mhm.
they would have less of a chance to go back to that space because sports also builds family. Like
Yeah.
people are family
Yes.
just because they love the same sports team. This is
Yes.
honest to
Mhm.
goodness truth. Like
Mhm.
Yes.
just because they love whatever team that they're going for, they have
Mhm.
that commonality between them, and we need those things. And sports gives us a way to do that without denouncing some of our other values that we hold close to us in identity. So if we just
Mhm.
both all identify as Atlanta Braves, like me and Julie here, we just identify as Atlanta
Go
Braves,
Braves.
then we don't have to discuss all of our other differences. We just want the Braves to win. That's
That's
enough
right.
for us to connect further. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
Mhm.
so that works for the schools. We understand the
Mhm.
schools mascots. People won't even say the name of the school that they're from. They'll say, "I'm a Wildcat." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and
Mhm.
then we have that identity there. And
Mhm.
then you talk about parenting. Well, look, this is where I feel sports can be super big or in a positive way or super big in a negative way. And then that still needs to be addressed. Is this a parent that's making their kid play sports because they didn't play or they didn't play how they wanted to play? It,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So
Oh,
Mhm.
I do.
Yep.
being
Yeah.
able to understand those things is where I feel like parents and coaches and athletes, especially parents and athletes in that tug of war of like, we want you to be great. We want you to do this. We want you to do that.
Mhm.
But
All the
does
pressure.
that give the
Sure.
athlete the voice? Or does that give them the level of control in this? And if it does, then how do we nurture that without damaging the person while they're
Mhm.
trying to be an athlete? Because
Mhm.
most of the athletes that we coach are not going to be athletes after they're 21, 22.
Right.
Right.
So when we look at sports being able to bring people together, it does do that. But then it also can cause other things that we want to safeguard against. And that's one of the ways that and I'll speak on that at the conference about how we can reduce some of the things that happen in sports that causes further trauma. Like, because trauma,
Mhm.
sports can be traumatic. And then I also go over injuries because they're kind of
Yes.
they're just a part of the sport. And so sports can cause traumas themselves. I've torn both of my ACLs and I broke an ankle. And so that has its own thing too, because you kind of, once you have an injury, you're then not with the team anymore. You don't
Right.
travel with the team.
Sideline.
You
Yeah.
start having to go to yeah, you're on the sideline, but you're in street clothes. You don't feel like you're really a
Right.
part of that
Right.
which you were a
Interesting.
part of as much anymore. And you kind of feel forgotten about. You know, this one it's one
Mhm.
of those things. So like when you talk about the injured athlete situation, then we also want to safeguard against some of those things too. Like how can we better support the injured athletes? Because before NIL and they start paying, when you can have a scholarship or something like that and you tear your ACL, you lose the scholarship, you lose your ability to play, lose your ability to go to school. Those types of things have a damaging effect on a
They
lot of
do. Yeah.
people
There's a lot of that.
because the
Yeah, your identity's involved.
Hmm.
identity and you
Hmm.
and it's an immediate and abrupt loss of identity and function. So you lose the identity, but you also lose function. Yesterday I could jump and dunk. Today I can't walk without help. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? That's very dramatic. And there's not a lot of space for it because all the attention is going to the playing players.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so
The game keeps going. Yeah. Yeah.
I also this is something that I hope to advocate for is like every team has a strength and conditioning coach. I just think there also should be some emotional wellness coaches as well that are on track.
Amen.
You know what I mean? Because it's like
Yes.
Yeah.
we, the difference between a physical injury and a mental injury or a mental trauma is we see people limping and we
Hmm.
Mm.
don't expect them to run
Hmm.
physically. Mentally, we have a harder time seeing what limping looks like after a traumatic situation. And we don't, because we have a hard time to seeing what that limping may look like mentally, we have a hard time asking people who are mentally injured not to run. We
Right.
expect them to run
Right.
because we don't see them limping and we don't identify
Yeah.
that. And that's another thing that I feel like we are able to show coaches like what signs that a player could be struggling because you could see them struggling if they're running and they're limping. You can't see that
Hmm.
mentally. It might show up as they missed a shot or they missed an assignment, they missed this and they missed that, and it's uncharacteristically so. And I think those were some of the things that maybe my coaches could have picked up on back when I was 14, 15. It's like,
Right. Yeah.
things are happening uncharacteristically of what was happening
Right.
before. And this could signal something or it could signal nothing, but let's explore. Let's see what it may be.
Right, pile on the shame, re-traumatize, or
Yeah.
catch this as an opportunity to
Right.
connect and heal
Absolutely.
and look at the bigger picture here.
Absolutely.
Wow. Wow. Martin, this is so powerful. I just,
It is. And we could talk for like the next 4 or 5 hours and our audience would be going, okay. But actually most of them would be hanging in with us because this is
absolutely.
stuff and it's so and it impacts us all. I mean, there's not many of us out here listening that aren't some kind of sports fan or some kind of sports participant. I mean, that just is kind of a given
Hmm.
in our culture. So I know this is resonating with everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Tell us quickly how folks can get in touch with you, and we'll make sure that that gets in the show notes as well.
Yeah, I'm on all the social medias as the Dopest Coach, TheDopest Coach, Coach. And if you want to email me, you can also email me at thedopestcoach@gmail.com. And then
Did,
you can go from there.
did you tell us what the dope stands for?
I don't think I did. So DOPE stands for, I didn't. DOPE stands for Develop, Organize, Process, Engage. It is absolutely derived from the neurosequential model. These are the four, basically the neurosequential model is it develops in sequence, it organizes in sequence, your brain processes in sequence, and then we should engage with it in the sequence of regulate, relate, reason. And
So
so
good.
yeah. So dope is, I tell people your brain is dope, and this is why. You
I
know.
love
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks for bringing your dope brain to us today to talk about this. It was great, Martin, And we're looking forward to learning from you again in June at the conference.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Cannot wait.
Can't wait.
And thank you all for listening today, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in. Join us next time when our guest will be C. Eshelman, an attachment and trauma specialist and founder of the Attach Place in California. She'll be bringing us therapeutic parenting wisdom. A special thanks to Joe Kramer for donating the music. To learn more about the Attachment and Trauma Network, visit us at www.attachtrauma.org. I'm Lauren Cassis, and as always, thank you for listening.